Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 4th of the 10th month as we comprehend it on our Creator's calendar, which happens to line up with December 13th, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And we are continuing our chronological study of the scriptures, and we are now on the book of Deuteronomy. Excuse me. We've covered everything that believe everything that has been written leading up to the time where we are right now, which is about 2450, 2449, and 11 months from creation until the beginning of this book. If you remember, Moshe was in the 11th month right here of the 40th year, where he's speaking to them, and he gives them a recap of everything that happened before he passes away, and then they enter into the promised land. So this is exactly, or Yahushua, the son of Nun, takes them in exactly 2,450 years from creation, the 50th Yobel from creation, according to the book of Yobelim, which was found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is also where we have all the calendar information. The one thing that we did not read that I mentioned that we were going to was the book of Modad and Heldad, I believe, or I might be saying their names wrong, but the two elders that were in the camp when the Ruach came upon them and they started foretelling. I remembered something about them and I went to go look it up. It was a few pages worth of writing, but it was just talking about that there was once a book, and the only extant reference we have to it is a quote in the Shepherd of Hermas. So we've read that before. If you go to the scripture studies and go all the way back to the earliest, some of the earliest videos we have, it started with Second Baruch, the end of it, and then going into the Shepherd of Hermas. And we've covered the entire thing there, but I'm sure we'll get to it again in the course of time. However, the book for their writing itself is no longer existent. It was literally just a quote, one verse from them that was quoted by Hermas and then mentioned to be in that book. If I can, I'll find the reference and put it in the description here or in the comments just so everyone can see that and then go look it up too. But please forgive me, I've packed all my books at the moment and I have to search everything online. Either way, this is, like I said, the book of Dabarim, or the words, or Deuteronomy is what it's called in English here. Chapter 1. It says, "These are the words which Moshe spoke to all Yisrael on this side Yarden, in the desert towards the west near the Red Sea, between Paran, or Pharan, Tophel, and Lobon, and Olon, and the gold works. A journey of 11 days from Horeb to Mount Seir as far as Kadesh Barnea. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month, Moshe spoke to all the children of Yisrael according to all things which Yahuah commanded him for them. After he had smitten Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth and in Edrain, beyond Yarden in the land of Moab, Moshe began to declare this law, saying, Yahuah, your Elohim, spoke to us in Horeb, saying, Let us suffice you to have dwelt in this mountain. Turn you and depart and enter into the mountain of the Amorites, and to all that dwell near about Arabah, and Beth Abara, I don't think is the same place, so never mind. And to the mountain, what is that? Is it the same over here? Yeah, it doesn't say that. So please forgive me. and to the mountain and the plain, and to the south, and the land of the Canaanim, near the sea, and Anti-Libanus, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, we know Lebanon is Libanus, but Anti-Libanus was another mountain range also named after the Titans or the mighty ones that were pre-flood. But I don't remember exactly what this mountain range is or where it's at in relation. It could be further north, like where it's at in Turkey, because the great river Euphrates is that other border that leads up to it, if you recall. But I don't know for certain. Let's actually look it up. Okay, so it's literally the eastern mountains of Lebanon against Lebanon. There you go. It says, behold, Elohim in italics has delivered the land before you. Go in and inherit the land, which I swear to your fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov, to give it to them and to their seed after them. And I spoke to you at that time, saying, I shall not be able by myself to bear you. Yahuah your Elohim has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as the stars of Shamayim for multitude. Yahuah Elohim of your fathers add to you 1,000-fold more than you are, and barak you as he has spoken to you. How shall I alone be able to bear your labor and your burden and your gainsayings? Take to yourselves wise and comprehending and prudent men for your tribes, and I will set your leaders over you. And you answered me and said, the thing which you have told us is tov to do. So I took of you wise and comprehending and prudent men, and I set them to rule over you as rulers of thousands, the Alphim, which in today would be the sheriff or the shire reeves of England and the sheriff of America, as it's morphed into the common law governments that we have. We've talked about that a little bit before, but we've carried the principles of this in the common law through history, keeping it more or less, sometimes losing it, sometimes not. But in our obedience and adherence to the common law, we've had liberty in our nations. The rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, and rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens, and officers to your judges. And I charged your judges at that time, saying, hear between your brethren, and judge rightly between a man and brother, and the stranger that is with him. You shall not have respect to persons in judgment. You shall judge small and great equally. You shall not shrink from before the person of a man, for the judgment is Yahuah's. It says Elohim here, but I thought that would say Yahuah is in the Masoretic there. I'll have to double check. Maybe it just depends on the translation. The ISR or the Hallelujah Scriptures might have that, but you'd also have to look at the Hebrew too. And whatsoever matter shall be too hard for you, you shall bring it to me, and I will hear it. Oh, just one moment. All right, thank you for that. I just double checked real quick, and this section does say the judgment or the right ruling is Elohim's in the Hebrew. So it's a separate section that I'm thinking of where it mentions the judgment is Yahuah's, but I want to be accurate in the information we're sharing. So when in doubt, you always want to check and never just be presumptuous if you can help it. It says, and whatsoever matter shall be too hard for you, you shall bring it to me, and I will hear it. And I charged upon you at that time all the commands which you shall perform, which is important and also part of the covenant. The 10 commandments were given by the voice of Elohim himself. Now, For those that know, we know that it was Yahushua Mashiach in the name of his Father, coming as Yahuah, the messenger Yahuah, who spoke face to face with Moshe, who was on Mount Sinai in the burning bush and on the flaming mountain, who was the one speaking that they heard the voice of. He's also the one that died to ratify the covenant, right? But he only speaks the words of his Father who is in him. So it's not like he's doing his own thing here. The idea, though, is we've talked about it before. The Father's perfect. He's infinite. There is no diminishing him. There's no way to be near him without being likewise perfect. And when he chose to make a creation, he created something that was like him, perfect, who was our Mashiach. And our Mashiach, seeing and likewise doing, but not in the same capacity, his making of a perfect partner to be with him takes time, which is what all of this is about, right? But the Father is not the one doing that. That's the point we have to keep in mind. He is the only true Elohim. He is greater than our Mashiach. But Yahushua was the one by whom everything came into being by the will of his Father. He is the word from the bosom of his Father, who, right? So, anyways, I don't mean to digress there. The point right here is that he gave 10 commandments with his voice, but he also charged us to hear what Moshe was going to be given and to do that. And that was also part of that covenant that was ratified by blood. And that includes all of the Sabbaths, the weekly Shabbat, and the festivals throughout the year that are considered Sabbaths that he said are mine. And that's what our forefathers not walking in were accounted as lame for doing or not doing. Right. We were just talking about that before the recording. There's foretellers that talk about when he would lead the blind in the way and the lame he would bring to him, right? And we'll get to that in the course of time. But that fulfillment of that was in the Reformation, when you had those that were coming to the truth. And many Christians, if you want to call them that, they have the fruits of the Ruach in them. They're kind, peaceable, loving, patient. They turn the other cheek. They do the things that he said to do. They're just deficient in the other matters that they were not aware of for whatever reason, just like we all were at one point. And I really mean that. Everyone is. We all grow into the truth, whether or not you're a child when you start learning or older. Brother Earl's talked about that before, and he's had some great information on it, right? But we'll continue here. It says, and I charged upon you at that time all the commands which you shall perform. And we departed from Horeb, and went through all that great wilderness and terrible, which you saw by the way of the mountain of the Amorite, as Yahuah our Elohim charged us. And we came as far as Kadesh Barnea. And I said to you, have you come as far as the mountain of the Amorite, which Yahuah our Elohim gives to you? Behold, Yahuah your Elohim has delivered to us the land before you. Go up and inherit it, as Yahuah Elohim of your fathers said to you. Fear not, neither be afraid. And you all came to me and said, let us send men before us, and let them go up to the land for us, and let them bring back to us a report of the way by which we shall go up, and of the cities into which we shall enter. And the saying pleased me, and I took of you 12 men, one man of a tribe, and they turned and went up to the mountain, and they came as far as the valley of the cluster, and surveyed it. And they took in their hands of the fruit of the land, and brought it to you, and said, the land is Tov, which Yahuah our Elohim gives us. But you would not go up, but rebelled against the words of Yahuah our Elohim. And you murmured in your tents and said, because Yahuah hated us and has brought us out of the land of Mitzraim to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us, whither do we go up? And your brethren drew away your heart, saying, a great nation and populous and mightier than we, and cities great and walled up to the Shamayim. Moreover, we saw there the sons of the giants. And it says the sons of the iniquity there. This is just translated as giants. And I said to you, fear not, neither be you afraid of them. Yahuah, your Elohim, who goes before your face, he shall fight against them together with you effectually, according to all that he wrought for you in the land of Mitzraim. And in this wilderness, which you saw by the way of the mountain of the Amorite, how Yahuah your Elohim will bear you as a nursling, and as if any man should nurse his child, through all the way which you have gone until you came to this place. And in this matter you believed not Yahuah our Elohim. And remember, it was belief, even in things that seemed impossible, that was accounted as righteousness to our forefather, and it is righteousness to us when we hear these words and we believe them to do it. It doesn't take rocket science, or it doesn't take a degree or a university education when he says, cease from doing work, think about my things, don't do your own pleasure, right? Or if he tells you, don't speak lies, don't steal or perjure yourself, don't bear false witness, right? There are certain ways that you're supposed to do things in your way of thinking, dressing, the way you conduct yourself, present yourself. Just about every facet of your life he's covered for you to be a pleasant possession to him. And it all boils down to the golden rule. Do not to another what you wouldn't want done to you, and to love Yahuah your Elohim with all of your heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Just to carry that home, 𤬀𤍅 in the recognitions explains that you cannot truly love another unless you love yourself, and self-love is the foundation of all good. Because if you don't love yourself enough to do whatever it takes to save your soul for eternity of unspeakable good, then you can't really love another to help them get to the same place. But it says, and in this matter you believed not Yahuah our Elohim, who goes before you in the way to choose you a place, guiding you in the fire by night, showing you the way by which you go, and a cloud by day. And Yahuah heard the voice of your words, and being greatly provoked, he swears, saying, not one of these men shall see this Tov land, which I swear to their fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him I will give the land on which he went up, and to his sons, because he attended to the things of Yahuah. And Yahuah was angry with me for your sake, saying, neither shall you by any means enter therein. Yahushua, the son of Nun, who stands by you, he shall enter in there. Do you strengthen him, for he shall cause Yisrael to inherit it. And every young child who this day knows not good and evil, or evil, they shall enter therein, and to them I will give it, and they shall inherit it. That condition is everyone under 20 years of age. He doesn't distinguish a 19-year-old as a man any more than 18, 17, or less. And he doesn't consider anyone over 20 to be a child in this capacity of not knowing good and evil. That's when you're accountable, at least as a man that I'm aware of. Another witness for this information is in The Dead Sea Scrolls, I don't remember the text itself, but there is a list of requirements for those and what positions they were allowed to do in the camp based on their age. Just like the Louis had certain age restrictions, there was age restrictions in there. From 10 to 20 is when you would teach them the covenant. But before then, you did not. And afterwards they were enter into it and be partakers. But they were not considered knowing good and evil or accountable before that time. It says, and you turned and marched into the wilderness by the way of the sea. And you answered and said, we have sinned before Yahuah our Elohim. We will go up and fight according to all that Yahuah our Elohim has commanded us. And having taken every one his weapons of war, and being gathered together, you went up to the mountain. And Yahuah said to me, tell them, you shall not go up, neither shall you fight, for I am not with you. Thus shall you not be destroyed before your enemies. And I spoke to you, and you did not hearken to me, and you transgressed the commandment of Yahuah, and you forced your way, and went up into the mountain. And the Amorite who dwelt in that mountain came out to meet you, and pursued you as bees do, and wounded you from Seir to Hermah. And you sat down and wept before Yahuah our Elohim, and Yahuah hearkened not to your voice, neither did he take heed of you. And you dwelt in Kadesh many days as you dwelt. And there's a lot, I don't really like talking about other people. I prefer keeping the focus on my own walk. So I want to encourage everyone, let's make sure that we're not in this position, that we don't grumble about the things happening in our life. We keep perspective that everything is a refinement process for our best, right? If we can do that, it helps us to overcome, because when we suffer by not deserving it, that incurs Elohim's favor. When we suffer for the things that we've done, you see that we can cry and weep before him, but he's not going to listen when you're not listening to him. You will reap the thing that you sow. It doesn't matter how much you cry about it. It only matters how much you repent of the evil that you're doing and you turn in obedience to the thing he told you to do, right? It's his mercy that he doesn't strike us down instantly when we deserve it, or as many times as we affront him, but it's also his justice and his righteousness that he won't abide by these things forever. There will come a time that we have to account for what we're doing against his truth. Now, it's to our great benefit that when we hear these things, we quickly turn from them, and then it's accounted as ignorance, which he does not hold against you, right? Because he is merciful and kind. He doesn't hold a grudge. And if you learn about these things to which you didn't know, and then you don't do them anymore, it was the ignorance in you that was causing the defect. And he will instantly remove that affront because it was not known to you. And now that you know, you're doing right. He says in 𤬀𤍍𝐻𝑍, if the one doing sin turns and does righteousness, in that he shall live, right? But the opposite is that you will not. So it's a consistent pattern throughout all of Scripture here, right? So chapter 2, and I didn't read the title before, please forgive me. This is the story is continued that they were not to meddle with the Edomites nor with the Moabites. Think about what these things mean today in context, right? Is it an inversion? We're not supposed to be violent and attack Edom, right? Nor with the Moabites, nor with the Ammonites, but Sihon the Amorite was subdued by them. says, we turned and departed into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as Yahuah spoke to me. And we compassed Mount Seir many days. And Yahuah said to me, now I'm hoping that by now you know that all of these things are a parable, so that you can see even in our wilderness journey in a spiritual capacity, we've been encompassed about Seir or Edom for a long time. We got swallowed up into the belly of the beast in Europe until the Reformation, for example, and most of them are still in that grip today. So there's a parallel there that you can see. This is in Yahuah said to me, you have compassed this mount long enough. Turn therefore toward the north and charge the people, saying, you are going through the borders of your brethren, the children of Esau, who dwell in Seir, and they shall fear you and dread you greatly. Do not engage in war against them, for I will not give you of their land even enough to set your foot upon. For I have given Mount Seir to the children of Esau as an inheritance. Buy food of them for money and eat. Now, this is the instructions that he was given, but you don't see that in the original account. He just goes and does these things. So the fact that it was given, just like the earlier accounts with Pharaoh and the words given, half of them were removed. That also seems to be the case in this instance, where you have it here in Deuteronomy, but not where it was originally given. It says, buy food of them for money and eat, and you shall receive water of them by measure for money and drink. For Yahuah our Elohim has blessed, or Baruch, you in every work of your hands. Consider how you went through that great and terrible wilderness. Behold, Yahuah your Elohim with you 40 years. You did not lack anything. And we passed by our brethren, the children of Esau, who dwelt in Seir, and by the way of Arabah from Ayalon, which, if I remember correctly, this is one of the two places that the luminaries stay stationary at by the command of Yahushua, the son of Nun, which we will get to pretty soon. And he has the moon standing over this place. And from 𤬀🐍🐅, and we turned and passed by the way of the desert of Moab. And Yahuah said to me, do not you quarrel with the Moabites, and do not engage in them, or in war with them. For I will not give you of their land for an inheritance, for I have given Aroer to the children of Lot to inherit. Formerly the Amim dwelt in it, a great and numerous nation and powerful, like the Anakim. These also shall be accounted Raphaim, like the Anakim. And the Moabites call them Omnim. Now, the Raphaim are the children of Ham. They're Hamites. Whether you want to call them giants or not, I can't say for certain, but that's what that Sanchonethos history and the second book kind of cover. If you remember, Cush was the instigator for the Tower of Babel generally. Ham's children were reigning all the way from Egypt into Greece and over into Babylon. And he had a central location as the King of Kings, or the Kronos, the horned one, um, ruling over them all until his death. That's kind of what that book covers. And that's part of why he was deified. It explains why the two horns of the bull was also used by Samaritan, or Nimrod's wife, because she was ruling at his behest. So there was two horns, but that's not, and it also goes with the crescent moon. There's a lot of symbolism with this stuff, but that's not important right now. The point is that the Rapha, or whatever, is directly related to the sons of Ham, just like Tidal, the king of nations, it mentions in Exodus, was the king over the Hamites that were in the area. This is, these also shall be accounted the Raphaim, like the Anakim, and the Moabites call them Omim. And the Horite dwelt in Seir before, and the sons of Esau destroyed them and utterly consumed them from before them. And they dwelt in their place, as Yisrael did to the land of his inheritance, which Yahuah gave to them. Now, this was given as an example of his delivering a people to take over another land to encourage the children that they were likewise going to do that. But I want you to consider that this was a foreshadow, an echo of what was going to happen. Just as Ishmael had 12 sons and Jacob later had 12, you have this echo in the non-promised seed to see a pattern of what would have been happening with the other one too. And here's another example of it. I can't say that happens in every instance, but it is an interesting parallel that you see. Now then, arise you and depart and cross the valley Zeret. And the days in which we traveled from Kadesh Barnea till we crossed the valley of Zeret were 38 years, until the whole congregation of men of war failed, dying out of the camp, as Yahuah Elohim sware to them. And if you recall, we talked about it was during this time, there's no mention of them keeping the festivals or doing those things. But on the contrary, it mentions that they were worshiping the host of the heavens and doing other abominations that they had learned from the heathen until they were taken out. We mentioned that when we were covering the account of when they kept atonement, and it was from that point on where they're going through till here, and they're going into the land repentant of that behavior that was causing the problems. I would also contest that that's probably after all these men of war had died, except for you had Aharon and Moshe generally. I don't know if there's mention of any more of them before or after that time. But it says, yeah, until the whole generation, so it only took 38 years for that, for the whole generation of the men of war failed, dying out of the camp, as Yahuah Elohim sware to them. And the hand of Yahuah was upon them to destroy them out of the midst of the camp until they were consumed. And it came to pass, when all the men of war, dying out of the midst of the people, had fallen, that Yahuah spoke to me, saying, You shall pass over this day the borders of Moab to Aroer, and you shall draw nigh to the children of Ammon. Do not quarrel with them, nor wage war with them, for I will not give you of the land of the children of Ammon for an inheritance, because I have given it to the children of Lot for an inheritance. And it shall be accounted a land of Raphaim, or Raphaim, for the Raphaim dwelt there before, and the Ammonites called them Zochomim, Zochomim. A great nation and populous and mightier than you, as also the Anakim, yet Yahuah destroyed them from before them, and they inherited, and they dwelt instead of them until this day. So another example of a weaker nation overcoming a stronger one by the providence of Yahuah, because it was his will. He's doing that again to encourage the children, as they did to the children of Esau that dwell in Seir, even as they destroyed the Horite from before them and inherited their country and dwelt instead of them until this day. And the Hivites who dwell in Ashdod to Gaza, and the Capricodians who came out of Capricodia destroyed them and dwelt in their room. And this one, the Capricodia, is that same word for the chapiter, and that's that word for the Philistines. It's similar to the Ramon or the pomegranate because it was the top or the pinnacle thing. That was the place that in the book of Sanchoniathos history, I believe it's the second one that goes into more detail about this one. I might be mistaken, but it was the place that the Canaanim, the shepherd kings, took over first, and it was their gateway into Egypt and controlling it. When they were run off, or when they went in, they ran off the original Egyptians, the Capricordians that were there, and they came in, like it mentions here, and took over. And when they took over Ashdod, they were known as the Philistines from Egypt, and that's the general origin of them. He's talking about it as a past event, and if you recall, there were already Philistines in the land by the time of Yitzhak, maybe Abraham. I don't remember if he was mentioned there, but just to give the contrast that this history had been going on. So I'm more familiar with this now that I had read those books that we had mentioned that Brother Earl was talking about before we were recording. I'll share a PDF for everyone I believe both of them are in there, but I have it right here actually. Excuse me. Sanchoniathos Phoenician History is the book that I'm keep mentioning. And then the second to it is a continuation where it's talking about the chronology and the history of the dukes and then king of Edom, with tying in with the wilderness journey and where that was placed. There's more to it as well, but it's a wonderful book. If you really are concerned about the idea of missing history, or the fact that there's millions and millions of years, or all the stuff that they can't prove, it's a bunch of nonsense. This book right here shows you secular history that ties all the way back to Adam and connects to the Olympiads. So there isn't all these millions of years of recorded anything, but it goes in agreement with what scripture says. And that is also where I've been learning about all of the migrations here that predated this time that I'm talking to you about. So I very much appreciate the information. He also goes over the origins of who these Horites are, where they came from, and the Lydians and the originals of the area of Greece, some of the predecessors there, who they were originally and where they came from. Very much enjoy learning that stuff because it really helps enlighten us about what children stayed where after they were given their allotments, right? But to continue here, it says, "Now then arise and depart, and pass over the valley of Arnon. Behold, I have delivered into your hands Sihon, the king of Heshbon, the Amorite, and his land. Begin to inherit, engage in war with him this day. Begin to put your terror and your fear on the face of all the nations under Shamayim, who shall be troubled when they have heard your name, and shall be in anguish before you. And I sent ambassadors from the wilderness of Kedamoth to Sihon, king of Heshbon, with peaceable words, saying, I will pass through your land. I will go by the road. I will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall give me food for money, and I will eat, and you shall give me water for money, and I will drink. I will only go through on my feet, as the sons of Esau did to me who dwelt in Seir, and the Moabites who dwelt in Aroer, until I shall have passed Yarden into the land which Yahuah our Elohim gives us. And Sihon the king of Heshbon would not that we should pass by him, because Yahuah our Elohim hardened his ruach and made his heart stubborn. And he gives to the inclination of what we deserve, right? Like he did with Pharaoh, that he might be delivered into your hands, as on this day. And Yahuah said to me, Behold, I have begun to deliver before you Sihon, the king of the Heshbon, the Amorite, and his land. And do you begin to inherit his land? And Sihon, the king of Heshbon, came forth to meet us, he and all his people, to war at Yassah. And Yahuah our Elohim delivered him before our face, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. And we took possession of all his cities at that time, and we utterly destroyed every city in succession, and their wives and their children, and we left no living prey. Only we took the captive or cattle captive and took the spoil of the cities. Now, some people can read these things and think unworthy and blasphemous thoughts about our Creator. It is mentioned directly in the recognitions of Clement that anyone first learning about Elohim and not knowing him must learn first that he's perfect and he does no wrong. And at no point ever should we attribute wrongdoing to him. When we keep that perspective, then something like this seems to be extremely out of place for a loving creator. And I can really see how you can read the Bible and miss the point. But when you look at the writings that have been hidden from the mass of people that plainly talk about these things, like the book of 𝤀𐤍𤅅𤤄𝐿, which goes into detail about the evil things that people were doing that he hated. When you read about, sorry, I heard something downstairs. When you read about in the Wisdom of Shlomo or 𝤀𐤄𐅅𤄍𝐿 Shlomo about the practices and the things that were going on that necessitated their being completely taken out, then you know that there is nothing unrighteous in what he was doing at all. Okay, it might seem harsh, but so is the punishment for sin, right? And he tells us very clearly that there were going to be some in his day that would be judged by those from Sodom and Gomorrah, and they would be more righteous than the people next to him, right? So that's not a good condemnation. But back on point here. It says, from Aurora, which is by the brink of the brook of Arnon, and the city which is in the valley, and as far as the mount of Galaad, there was not a city which escaped us. Yahuah our Elohim delivered all of them into our hands. Only we did not draw near to the children of Ammon, even all the parts bordering on the brook Yabok, and the cities in the mountain country, as Yahuah our Elohim charged us. All right. Chapter 3. This is the story of the conquest of Og, the king of Bashan, and the bigness of his bed, the distribution of those lands to the 2.5 tribes, right? And Moshe's prayer to enter into the land, and he is permitted to see it. Now, Bashan is related in name. It's not, if you look up what it means, it won't tell you this. You have to look at the Hebrew letters and just look at different meanings of the same letters and what they spell out. It's probably, they'll say it's not pronounced the same, but Bashan is related to the root word for shame. It's where we get the word for a female dog in English. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Bashan is directly connected it's explained in I believe it's in the Peshar Habakkuk. I might be mistaken. There's many Peshars or interpretations of the foretellers in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And one of the great benefits is they'll take a verse or two and then they'll explain the meaning of it. And sometimes they give very interesting explanations for the parables in there that you can take and see how it means throughout the rest of the text. A lot of the texts that were foretelling actual events, because Bashan was a literal place and the people and things mentioned literally happened, but they were taking foretellings that had gone on and explaining that Bashan was the Kittim, and their king, meaning the Caesars or the little hornet later on, because those were monarchs over them as opposed to the Senate. But the king was like Carmel. So when you find the foretellings about Carmel and Bashan and speaking of these things, there was a literal first physical fulfillment with these actual places and peoples involved. And then the spiritual application and what it was meaning to fulfill was coming through Rome. And it was explained like that. There is a great amount of insight into those, and that is the really the sole purpose, I think the greatest benefit of studying the Dead Sea Scrolls for those Peshars in particular is to learn what he's trying to teach us about the meanings of these parables and not just jump to our own conclusions. There's some things that we can only infer today. There's no explanation, but it's a pattern that fits what is in history. Um, that's always the most dubious kind of explanation. And to be perfectly candid, I'll give you an example. In fourth Ezra, you have the fourth beast kingdom as a three-headed eagle that's given more full explanation of what would happen to them, specifically after the reign of Caesar and on, although it's a little mushed up. However, it doesn't go into detail overly much about all the nuances of it. I and others have inferred and we have learned that the three heads represent the three city states in the world today: the Vatican, the London Business District, and Washington, D.C. The great head that was first risen was the British Empire that has lost its power. It died in sickness on its bed, as it mentioned. And that was the key to helping to understand that because of the history behind the monarchs of Europe at this, or of Britain now. Before Elizabeth, her father died in sickness on his bed when the British Empire lost its worldly power, and that head was coming down. So it fits the pattern of history, and the head that's reigning is America now, who will be taken out militarily by the last head, which is Vatican. It's in the process of happening as we speak with the ruination of popular government by the Counter-Reformation. Most people don't really have an idea what's going on, but it's literally the fulfillment of history that you can see the pattern there. The only other parallel that you have that explains it is not a plain, well, this is the meaning, but it's a parable of the foretellings that we've covered with Yahuah in Egypt. After he's sold into slavery by his brothers, he becomes the right hand of Pharaoh, given dominion by him, and he helps to gather all the resources to him, just like his children have been used by Rome to recapitulate the world to the papacy. Pretty much whoever will not submit to the good news that was given out by our forefathers had to get the other kingdom, because there are only two, and we don't get to just sit on the fence. It's either we're in the one or the other, right? So a lot of stuff to keep in mind, but I want to read these. This is a literal narrative of what actually happened, a recapitulation, but there's also parables involved. If you take it, if you look at the meaning of what is, and you listen to what scripture says these things mean, we might be able to learn a lot more, right? But here we go. It says, and we turned and went by the way leading to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out to meet us, he and all his people, to battle at Adrain. And Yahuah said to me, fear him not, for I have delivered him and all his people and all his land into your hands. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon. And Yahuah our Elohim delivered him into our hands, even Og, the king of Bashan, and all his people. And we smote him until we left none of his seed. And we mastered all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we took not from them. 60 cities, all the country round about Argob, or Argob, belonging to King Og in Bashan. All strong cities, lofty walls, gates, and bars, besides the very many cities of the Pezerites. We utterly destroyed as we dealt with Sihon, the king of Heshbon, so we utterly destroyed every city in order, and the women and the children, and all the cattle, and we took for a prey to ourselves the spoil of the cities. And we took at that time the land out of the hands of the two kings of the Amorites, who were beyond Yarden, from the brook of Arnon even unto Hermon. The Zidonians call Hermon Sanior, but the Amorite has called it Sanir. So just similar, but with a different vowel there. That one has an O, that one's missing it. And all the cities of Misor, and all Galaad, and all Bashan, as far as Elcha and Adraim, cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the Raphim. Behold his bed, a bed of iron. Behold, in the chief city of the children of Ammon, the length of it 9 cubits, and the breadth of it 4 cubits, according to the cubit of a man. Now, this is conjecture, but I want to help try to clear things up. It says that there were giants before and after the flood, and giants to men, you have evidence of larger statured men. But the idea of messengers mating with women again after the flood is nowhere ever mentioned. There's no curse, there's no mountains high men or 3 different types ever mentioned again. But you do see the remnants of very large men. And specifically, these are tied to the Hamites that I was trying to mention to you, or the older generations of people in the land. These are the ones that were left of them. And if you think about it, this is what I'm trying to help you out with. After the flood, we have evidence that Noah's wife was, or her sarcophagus rather, was 18 feet long. The bones that were found in the area that were the finger bones of a woman were, one digit was the size, usually the size of a hand of Ron Wyatt's wife. So she was a very large for a normal person, but she was not a giant compared to the others that had mixed. They were just larger beforehand, and they got, or we got smaller as time has gone on. Along with being smaller, we also got more sickly, more disease ridden, less long in our lifespan. And these are the effects that you see. Ham, Shem, and Japheth presumably lived to almost 600 years old. After Noah died 350 years after the flood, they still lived for about another 150 years. Their children lived for over 400 years. Their children for over 300 years. Their children for, like, by the time Terach was coming around, he was at 215 years, and Abram was just under 200. And that was 10 generations from Noah. So that consecutively less and less to the time where Moshe was 120, and that was considered long. Other people were dying sooner than that already because of sin and transgression and whatever. The point is, these people that were living for longer periods of time were also larger, healthier, and of a better constitution. They, some of them survived, but not all the generations lived that long. The ones that survived a little longer were called the Raphim here. They were known, he was the last one that was still of that very large nature. So, willing, you can see it's just the children that were still living that were dying off of those older generations. At least that's how I gather it. It was not actual giants from messengers. There might be witchcraft and magic involved to make them of a larger stature, do other things, just like you use steroids to make yourself larger than is normally naturally possible, right? You would use a form of sorcery. And just for context, uh, herbs and things medicinal, those are scriptural. Using horse blood and things like what other things that are not given for that purpose is witchcraft or witches' brews and concoctions of that nature. I'm not saying the proper words or terminology, but it is in scripture. And our late brother John Todd, he really went into detail about that. I was completely ignorant of almost anything related to magic or occult stuff. It was not my forte, but I am a sincere, honest believer. I've had magic phenomenon I've been familiar with and I've looked into it. So I know the stuff is true, but it was not something that I had been um, used to in my life. Anyways, this is for only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the Raphaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron in the chief city of the children of Ammon, and the length of it 9 cubits, and the breadth of it 4 cubits, according to the cubit of a man. And we inherited that land at that time from Aurora, which is by the border of the torrent Arnon, and half the mount of Galaad, and I gave his cities to Reuben and to Gad, and the rest of Galaad and all Bashan. The kingdom of Og I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh, and all the country round about Argob, all that Bashan, all that Bashan, it shall be accounted the land of Raphaim. And Yair, the son of Manasseh, took all the country round about Argob as far as the borders of Gargassi and Malkathai, and he called them by his name Bashan. Thavoth Yair to this day. And that's, I think, the cities or the villages of Yathir. The hamlets, sorry. So not cities, but smaller, like villages. It says, and to Machir I gave Galaad, and to Reuben and to Gad I gave under Galaad, as far as the brook of Arnon, the borders between the brook and as far as Yabok. The brook is the border to the children of Ammon. This information would later be cited by Jephthah of the tribe of Manasseh, who became judge over the people when he was contesting with Ammon, and they were trying to fight them over their territory here. We will cover that in the book of Judges. It says, in Arabah and Yarden are the boundary of Machanarath, even to the sea of Arabah, the salt sea under Ashdod, Pashka, eastward. And I charged you at that time, saying, Yahuah, your Elohim, has given you this day by lot. Arm yourselves, everyone powerful, and go before your brethren, the children of Yisrael. Only your wives and your children and your cattle. I know that you have much cattle. Let them dwell in your cities which I have given you. Until Yahuah, your Elohim, give your brethren rest, as also he has given to you, and they also shall inherit the land, which Yahuah, our Elohim, gives them on the side of the Yarden. Then you shall return, each one to his inheritance, which I have given you. And I commanded Yahushua at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all things, which Yahuah our Elohim did to these 2 kings. So shall Yahuah our Elohim do to all the kingdoms against which you cross over there. You shall not be afraid of them, because Yahuah our Elohim himself shall fight for you. And I want you to keep in mind that all throughout the time of Yahushua, you never hear him not being obedient to the truth there. He never once fears anything that happens. When the men are overcome, he doesn't act afraid. He goes and petitions Yahuah. He tears his garments and makes himself prostrate before the ark, but he's not afraid of men, right? And I besought Yahuah at that time, saying, Yahuah Elohim, you have begun to show to your servant your strength and your power and your mighty hand and your high arm. For what Elohim is there in Shamayim or on earth who will do as you have done and according to your might? I will therefore go over to see this Tov land that is beyond Yarden, this Tov mountain and Anti-Libanus. And Yahuah, because of you, did not regard me, and hearkened not to me. And Yahuah said to me, let it suffice you, speak not of this matter to me any more. Go up to the top of the quarried rock, and look with your eyes westward, and northward, and southward, and eastward, and behold with your eyes, for you shall not go over this Yarden. Now, the renewed covenant explanation, I believe, is in Irenaeus's writings, and he talks about how it was to show that Moshe could not bring us in, but it was through Yahushua in his name that we are delivered into the promises. And it's by his strength and power that we can have the victory and accomplishment where Moshe was not able. That doesn't mean that the it doesn't mean that we don't keep the law, right? But that shows that the Torah was a trainer until the renewed covenant came. It's a type and picture. And it's through him we were to follow and be like him. It's only by his belief in his accomplished works of what he's done that we can come to the truth and walk in love. Right? But it says, in charge Yahushua, and strengthen him and encourage him, for he shall go before the face of this people, and he shall give them the inheritance of all the land which you have seen. And we abode in the valley near the house of Peor, or Phagor. Now, this is chapter 4, an exhortation to obedience, and Moshe appoints 3 cities of refuge on that side of the Yarden. All right. It says, and now, Yisrael, hear the ordinances and judgments that I teach you this day to do, that you may live and be multiplied, and that you may go in and inherit the land which Yahuah Elohim of your fathers gives you. And you shall not add to the word which I command you, and you shall not take from it. Keep the commandments of Yahuah our Elohim, all that I command you this day. Your eyes have seen all that Yahuah our Elohim did in Baal Phagor. For every man that went after Baal Phagor, Yahuah your Elohim has utterly destroyed him from among you. But you that kept close to Yahuah your Elohim are all alive today. So this is after the wilderness journey, after their 40 years. You remember they were going near the land when the Moabites tried to get Balaam to curse them. And it was right before they were being brought in here that that incident happened. And all the people that went after Baal Phagor after they should have known better were wiped out. This is just like when you see the examples of evil, wicked kings. I can't remember which one it was, but Manasseh. Manasseh, the son of 𤬀𐤍𤅅𤄍𝐿, who lived 55 years doing wickedness and evil, brought in idols into the temple itself, set up the whole worship of the host of the heavens. And because of what he did in there, Yahuah promised that he was going to destroy the place, in which he did 4 generations later with Babylon coming in, right? But he repented as an old man and turned back to the truth, and he was forgiven. The prayer of Manasseh talks about that. There's a few other places that mention it. However, his son, I believe it was his son, contriving in his mind that he can do evil and then repent when he's an old man, died very young, got sick and died. Because knowing better, he chose to do the evil, and then he was quickly corrected for it, right? We have to keep that in mind. We have all of the past history to rely on. We can't keep doing the things that he's abominated and tried to teach us not to. But it says, behold, I have shown you ordinances and judgments as Yahuah commanded me, that you should do so in the land into which you go to inherit it. And you shall keep and do them. For this is your 𝤀𤄍𝐅𝐿𝐿 and binah, or wisdom and comprehension, before all nations, as many as shall hear all these ordinances. And they shall say, behold, this great nation is a wise and comprehending people. For what manner of nation is so great, which has Elohim so near to them as Yahuah our Elohim, in all things and whatsoever we may call upon him? And what manner of nation is so great, which has righteous ordinances and judgments according to all this law, which I set before you this day? Take heed, and no one can say that Yahushua is a curse, right? But if they have his Ruach in him, he is the Torah and the Torah giver. Take heed to yourself and keep your heart diligently. Forget not any of these or any of the things which your eyes have seen, and let them not depart from your heart all the days of your life. And you shall teach your sons and your sons' sons, even the things that happened in the day in which you stood before Yahuah our Elohim in Horeb, in the day of the assembly. For Yahuah said to me, gather the people to me, and let them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days which they live upon the earth, and they shall teach their sons. And you drew nigh and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire up to Shamayim, darkness, blackness, tempest. And Yahuah spoke to you out of the midst of the fire, a voice of words which you heard. You saw no likeness, only a voice. And this is repeated in the renewed covenant. This is why I don't advocate any pictures of our Mashiach. I think it's breaking the third commandment. No images of anything, period. It says here that you saw no form, you only heard a voice of words. And in the renewed covenant, I believe it's an epistle by Shaul or Paul, where he mentions, and if we have known him, now we no longer know him in the flesh. If we've known him in the flesh, now we no longer know him so. We intentionally don't bring to mind an image when we venerate the word of our Creator. It's not about pictures, images, or icons, which has been the lead source of idolatry for the last few thousand years. It says, and he announced to you his covenant, which he commanded you to keep, even the 10 commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tables of stone. And Yahuah commanded me at that time to teach you ordinances and judgments, that you should do them on the land into which you go to inherit. And take good heed to your hearts, for you saw no similitude in the day in which Yahuah spoke to you in Horeb, in the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, lest you transgress and make to yourselves a carved image, any kind of figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast of those that are on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird which flies under Shamayim, the likeness of any reptile which creeps on the earth, the likeness of any fish of those which are in the waters under the earth. And least having looked up to the sky, and having seen the sun and the moon and the stars and all the Shamayim bodies, you should go astray and worship them and serve them, which Yahuah your Elohim has distributed to all nations under Shamayim. So this is why I was telling you, and this is why the Gregorian calendar is the calendar of the world, because our Creator, the one in who speaks and it is, who makes reality manifest by his word, has declared to us that he's given them to worship it. And if you remember how astrology works, they tie it to the sun, the moon, the stars. Every day's horoscopes are all planned out, gematria and these things. They line up all the numbers and do all that stuff. It's all satanic contrivance because it was commanded by our Creator that they would do so. So the evil one is given permission to allow it and to make a thing of it, right? But you can look at the Gregorian calendar and you can see that it's keyed to the stars of the sidereal day. Any day of the year on the Gregorian calendar, any time of the day, you can look at a star chart and find out exactly what stars are overhead. And it will be the exact same every time on that calendar because that is what it is keyed to, right? And the fact that the Gregorian calendar uses that system for its days, it generally is a sun worshiping calendar with that. And then you have to have for their first festival of Ishtar, they look to the full moon. So it literally follows the sun, moon, and stars for the reckoning of their festivities, like it mentions, right? That he would do that. His calendar works differently according to what he said, and we'll get to that when we read those. But until then, you can look at the Dead Sea Scrolls to see it. You can see it in the book of First Hanoch or First Enoch, although that's more of an abridged version. Okay, but you're more than welcome to look at those things, and it's not quite the same. It does match with reality, though, in what was established. But I don't want to digress too much anymore. It says, but Elohim took you and led you forth out of the land of Mitzraim. If you remember, that means the confiner of the waters as well. Because Mitzrayim made the Nile, instead of it being a flat floodplain that was all, he built up the borders of the Nile there. So he was literally the one that constrained the waters. But when you're like the waters and it was constraining you, it has a negative connotation. That's the meaning of it in the Hebrew, which is why I try to use the Hebrew word. Egypt has no significance, no meaning to it, no spiritual significance in that sense. But he says, he took you out of Mitzrayim, out of the iron furnace, out of Mitzrayim, to be to him a people of inheritance, as at this day. And Yahuah Elohim was angry with me for the things said by you, and swear that I should not go over this Yarden, and that I should not enter into the land, which Yahuah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. Now I want you to see here, he's plainly telling you that Yahuah was angry with the people, and because of his anger at the people, Moshe was prevented from entering the promised land. We've read over the account and you see that it was Moshe's disobedience when he was told to speak to the waters and he struck it that caused that prevention. That doesn't make a contradiction. It does not seem like it makes sense to people if it's just taken at plain value. And if you want to, you can try to construe things to make it mean whatever you want. But when you take in other examples or the full body of what is written everywhere you can find it for an explanation, this is gone over in the best detail in Gad the seer. But you have in Kings, Chronicles, and Gad the seer an account of the people doing evil and Yahuah inciting the adversary to incite, or allowing the adversary to incite Dawid to number them. And Dawid is overcome because the people were doing evil. Dawid is allowed to transgress so that the people would have to suffer punishment, because the people couldn't suffer without the king suffering or their ruler. That is explained, that nuance of the detail is explained in the Shepherd of Hermas, a renewed covenant writing, where Hermas himself is under judgment for what his children and wife are doing. And he was made to fall into a sin to be corrected so that they could as well, and his entire household. And the fullness of the explanation is given in that writing, the Shepherd of Hermas. But you can see the examples pre renewed covenant in the ones I mentioned. And then you can see where he's talking about it here, even though it's not explained. So when there is someone given a position of authority, they rise and fall with the people get the leader they deserve. That's how reality works. So if you are doing evil as a collective, you're going to have an evil ruler that's going to do things that you deserve. Just like when the children in the time of Judges forsook the law, the Midianites came in and ravaged them and ruled over them, or the Philistines, or XYZ. Any number of enemies had dominion over them because they refused to be under their creator. The same is true today. We only have the two kingdoms. You're either partaking of Yahuah's or you're subjected to Satan's, right? Now, if you're partaking of Yahuah's, you are not subjected to Satan's. You are protected by the host of messengers. As far as I'm aware, even corrections for believers are not done by necessarily minions of Satan all the time. I can't vouch for that without or with more than one witness. However, possibly the book of Enoch, I'd have to go over that again. But the messengers over the people, the chief messengers, some of them have to do with correction, I believe. And then in the Shepherd of Hermas, it's talked about how it's messengers of our Maker who correct his children for them to repent. It most certainly would not be a demon's willing willing job to only punish you till you repent. They would want to keep you in delusion, which is what they are allowed to do. If you look at what the two spirits are given for, whatever one you choose to act on, if you are a liar, if you do perjure yourself, if you are a coward, if you actually do the things he said not to, you give yourself over to the jurisdiction of the one who acts that way, right? And then they can influence you with their behaviors. We've talked about that before in a few different videos, and we can go over it again in detail sometime if you'd like to. But I'm just trying to show you these things are all throughout Scripture, but the explanation is not everywhere. You have to, it's a little here, a little there, and you learn it as you go. But this is what 𝐻𐬋𐤅𤄡 was talking about, why we have the truth and the Ruach in us will lead us into all truth. That was the part of it, right? He says, and Yahuah Elohim was angry with me for the things said by you, and swear that I should not go over this Yarden, and that I should not enter into the land, which Yahuah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. For I am to die in this land, and shall not pass over this Yarden, but you are to pass over, and shall inherit this good land. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahuah our Elohim, which he made with you, and you transgress and make to yourselves a graven image of any of the things concerning which Yahuah your Elohim commanded you. For Yahuah your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. And when you shall have begotten sons, and shall have sons' sons, and you shall have dwelt a long time on the land, and shall have transgressed and made a graven image of anything, and shall have done wickedly before Yahuah your Elohim to provoke him, I call the Shamayim and earth this day to witness against you, that you shall utterly perish from off the land into which you go across the Jordan to inherit it there. And did it happen? Yes, it did. He called heaven and earth to witness that if they were to make graven images after a few generations and serve them, they would utterly be taken out of the land, which did happen. It wasn't immediate, but it absolutely happened. It happened once with Babylon, and then it happened on a larger scale with Rome. You shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall be utterly cut off. And this is why to Abraham it was given as a promise. Yitzhak and Yaakov, they did not inherit the land here. And even the children right here, it was not the inheritance forever. This was a temporary. You can say it was, they were in here on his good pleasure as long as they were doing that. But it was not theirs to keep and walk in evil. As it's mentioned here, once they turned away, they were removed. And we're not going to be brought back until we repent, as it's mentioned by John Wilson in his mission of Eliyahu, the whole purpose of what Eliyahu and 𝤀𤍍𤐅𐤄𝐿, the forerunner, came to do, right? It says, and you shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall be utterly cut off. And Yahuah shall scatter you among all nations. And you shall be left. Does that mean the Chinese, the Japanese, or the other Asiatic nations, the Far Eastern? And what about the African? What about the Western Hemisphere? Right? Everywhere, all nations. Now, the fact that we became many nations in ourselves is also true. That doesn't change the fact there. And that's something that I've tried to point out. We can't be dogmatic like, oh, the children of Abraham are only one particular skin color today. There might be a predominant skin color for some people of some tribes. There might be sections of them somewhere, but we can't be dogmatic about things like that. It says, and you shall be left few in number among all the nations among which Yahuah shall bring you, and you shall there serve other mighty ones, the works of the hands of men, wood and stones, which cannot see, nor can they hear, nor eat, nor smell. And there you shall seek Yahuah your Elohim, and you shall find him whenever you shall seek him with all your heart and with all of your inner being in your affliction. And this is the one thing I want to encourage everyone with. That's my life. That was my story. I mentioned it a few times to our group. I don't know if I've ever done it all the way online or anything, but it was in my misery and affliction when I was suffering that I prayed for help. And I didn't know his name at the time, but I said, if you're real, please help me. And then I had the inclination to read the Bible. And I had the inclination to do like it said to do, like a child. And from there, he just brought me on. But it's the truth playing out, is my point. These things really happening is what was like a smelling salt to my life. Really shocked me, really got me to pay attention to these words like it was my life, like it was that treasure in the field that he talks about. And all these things shall come upon you in the last days. So in all your tribulation, which the tribulation began, the great tribulation from Revelation was going on at the time 𤀀𤍍𤅅 was writing. He mentions it in the very text that's gone over in great detail in the Antichrist for Dummies, but it's something that's completely ignored today when they try to push this future nonsense stuff. But it's after the tribulation of those days that the tampering with those faulty translations would happen, and that's already a thing in the world today. After the tribulations of those days, after the Inquisitions and the Dark Ages and all those massive, horrendous tortures, those were the tribulations. Those were specifically mentioned in Revelation. It was gone over in detail. It's gone over in the sky. It's mentioned in the signs, and you can see that in the Antichrist for Dummies. But it's when we are in our tribulation and all these things are come upon you, right, that we are to turn to him and shall hearken to his voice. Because Yahuah, your Elohim, is an Elohim of pity, mercy, right? He will not forsake you nor destroy you. He will not forget the covenant of your fathers, which Yahuah swore to them. Ask the former days which were before you, from the day when Elohim created man upon the earth, and at the end of Shamayim to the other end of Shamayim, if there has happened anything like to this great event, if such a thing has been heard. If a nation have heard the voice of the living El speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and have lived. If Elohim has essayed to go and take to himself a nation out of the midst of a nation, with trial and with signs and with wonders and with war and with a mighty hand and with a high arm and with great sights, according to all the things which Yahuah our Elohim did in Mitzraim in your sight, so that you should know that Yahuah your Elohim, he is Elohim, and there is none apart from him. His voice was made audible from Shamayim to instruct you, and he showed you upon the earth his great fire. And you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. Because he loved your fathers, he also chose you, their seed, after them, and he brought you himself with great strength out of Mitzraim, or with his great strength out of Mitzraim, to destroy nations great and stronger than you before your face, to bring you in, to give you their land to inherit, as you have it this day. And you shall know this day, and shall consider in your heart, that Yahuah your Elohim, he is Elohim in Shamayim above, and on the earth beneath, and there is none apart from him. And keep you his commandments and his ordinances, all that I command you this day, that it may be well with you and with your sons after you, that you may be long-lived upon the earth, which Yahuah your Elohim gives you forever. Now, just to be perfectly honest, and please, if someone knows better, correct me, or if you can think of anything else, feel free to share. But correlation to long life is directly tied to obedience. There is the two go hand in hand. And in particular, honoring your father and your mother leads to long life upon the land. That's one. Not acting a fool leads to continuing life. So it mentions that a fool can shorten his life, and we are not to do that. So consequently, those are the only two that I can think of off the top of my head that directly mention it. But obedience to his word leads to long, prosperous, healthy, successful life. You can't be successful without him. And while people, they hold to luck and things that are not, that are flippant and not of our creator, there is no success or there is no failure without his will. He is absolutely supreme. And when we have that in mind and we ask him for help and we rely on him in all things, how could you go wrong? How could you not be successful? Right? We have all the examples of scripture to prove these things. Then Moshe separated 3 cities beyond Yarden on the east, excuse me, that the slayer might flee there, who should have slain his neighbor unintentionally, and should not have hated him in times past, and he shall flee to one of the cities and live. And because they would have a trial, and if he was found to have not been guilty of murder or malicious intent in the killing of the individual, they would have refuge in the city. If they were found to have maliciously done it, which Yahuah is all powerful, your wickedness would come to light, then even those that grab onto his altar for succor, if you will be taken and killed, like what happened to Yahuah. It says Bezor in the wilderness, in the plain country of Reuben, and Ramoth in Galaad, belonging to Gad, and Galon or Gal on in Bashan, belonging to Manasseh. The word for Gaul there is prevalent. I don't know if that was one of the originals for it, but I know it is a Hebrew word that kind of got used. I believe one of the books mentioned it was tied to moon worship and those that had done that, but I can't say that is the etymology that all of them agree with. So I'll have to double check there. But it says, "This is the law which Moshe set before the children of Yisrael. These are the testimonies and the ordinances and the judgments which Moshe spoke to the sons of Yisrael when they came out of the land of Mitzraim on the other side of the Yarden, in the valley near the house of Phegor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, whom Moshe and the sons of Yisrael smote when they came out of the land of Mitzraim. And they inherited his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Yarden eastward. From Aroer, which is on the border of the brook Arnon, even to the mount of Sihon, which is Hermon, all Arabah beyond Yarden eastward, under Ashdod, hewn in the rock. Hewn in the rock, I guess that's describing the topographical features of that area. Right. And here, this one will probably be the last one we'll be able to read for today, but we'll check and see. This is chapter 5, and this is the covenant in Horeb, the 10 commandments, and at the people's request, Moshe receives the law from Elohim. So this is a recapitulation of what they'd already had happen, and we've read in Exodus, I believe, 20. But I do want you to see here, there is a missing section from the book of Exodus where after Yahuah speaks to them, he tells Moshe that he will bring a foreteller like unto him, who they have to listen to in all things. It's a direct foretelling about Yahushua coming later that you should have been able to see right there in Exodus, but it has been removed from that account, and you only find it here, but you do find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls for the account for Exodus and the Samaritan Pentateuch and other places. So I've actually shared that. I think in 2015, we put some Facebook posts together where we were sharing that and a few links where you can see it for yourself as well. But it really helps with the context of who's speaking, which is why I think it's important. It says, and Moshe called all Yisrael and said to them, Shema, or hear, believe, and do, Yisrael, the ordinances and judgments, all that I speak in your ears this day, and you shall learn them and observe to do them. Yahuah your Elohim made a covenant with you in Horeb. Yahuah did not make this covenant with your fathers, but with you. You are all here alive this day. And Yahuah spoke to you face to face in the mountain out of the midst of the fire. And I stood between Yahuah and you at that time to report to you the words of Yahuah, because you were afraid before the fire, and you went not up to the mountain, saying, I am Yahuah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzraim, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other mighty ones against my face or before my face. That word is literally the word for yoke as well. It's properly, like right here, it's used as above, over, upon, or against. It's the yoke of an ox. This is, you shall not make to yourself an image nor likeness of anything, whatever things in the Shamayim above, or whatever in the earth beneath, or whatever in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor shall you serve them. For I am Yahuah your Elohim, 𝐻𐤄𤅅𤄊𝐿, or a jealous El, visiting the sins of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth, it says generation here, of them that hate me, and doing mercifully to thousands of them that love me and that keep my commandments. The two go hand in hand, right? And that's 𝐤𐄍𐤅𐤄𝐅, what is that? The chapter 5, first epistle, chapter 5, very plainly says that. The whole book really, or the whole letter, but it really plainly says it right there in the beginning of that. It says, and you shall not take the name of Yahuah your Elohim in vain. This is a very poor translation, I'm sorry. But it says, you shall not, right, lift up, bear, or carry the name of the Shem of Yahuah your Elohim to Shwa. And that means desolation, evil, ruin, lies, uselessness, vanity, right? So you don't bring it to naught. And it says, for he will not hold him guiltless, it says, but that's not what it says either. You have to look at the word in Hebrew here. It says, primitive root, to be clean or to be made pure. You will not be extirpated if you lift his name to naught or you bring it to vain things. So it has an entirely different meaning from not holding you guiltless or not leaving you unpunished. It literally says he will not cleanse you, which has massive implications, especially if you look at 𤀍𐤅𐤄𝐿 chapter 1, where the father is speaking to his son, talking about how only the pure, only the clean have a place with him, not the impure. We've talked about that a little bit before, but this is one of the things where you can plainly see they're blatantly wrong with the translations in English for what these things mean in the Hebrew. Because if it was to tell you plainly that you're not supposed to not use his name, or he will not cleanse you if you do such things, you wouldn't act that way, right? Says, I just shared the 10 Commandments this morning on Facebook, which is why I had that on my mind, but I'll go ahead and share it in our Telegram group as well. And I'll put a copy of it in the description with a link so anyone that wants to can check it out. But it says, keep the Sabbath Yom to set him apart or it apart, as Yahuah your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you shall work, and you shall do all your works. But on the seventh day, the Sabbath of Yahuah your Elohim, you shall do in it no work, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant, your ox and your donkey and all your cattle, and the stranger that sojourns in the midst of you, that your manservant may rest in your maid and your ox, as well as you. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzraim, and Yahuah your Elohim brought you out thence with a mighty hand and a high arm. Therefore Yahuah appointed you to keep the Shabbat Yom and to set it apart. honor your father and your mother. And a lot of these should have the Aleph Tav before them. It's really in this one you get to see everything that he made, he owns, and he puts it before there. You see like um, before the heavens, the earth, father and mother, the things that he's made, that he claims that Aleph Tau is sovereign over. You find in this particular, or sorry, in Exodus chapter 20. I don't know if it's repeated here word for word exactly, but you'll find the Aleph Tau before all of those things of which he has created and he is the master of by the will of his father. This is, you shall have no other mighty ones before my face. I, I, I read that one. I'm sorry. I was going backwards. There we go. So it says, honor eth your father and eth your mother, as Yahuah your Elohim commanded you, that it may be well with you, and that you may live long upon the land, which Yahuah your Elohim gives you. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor his field, nor his manservant, nor his maid, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor any beast of his, nor anything that is your neighbor's. These words Yahuah spake to all the assembly of you in the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, darkness, blackness, storm, a loud voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tables of stone, and he gave them to me. And it came to pass when you heard the voice out of the midst of the fire, for the mountain burned with fire, that you came to me, even all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And you said, behold, Yahuah our Elohim has shown us his esteem, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. This day we have seen that Elohim shall speak to man, and he shall live. And now, and no man has heard the voice of the Father in his flesh and lives. That's what's told. So this Elohim who we heard, or our forefathers heard, is not the Father. It is our Mashiach, which I've mentioned to you, that's explained elsewhere. But this is just another example of that thing being true, because the scriptures cannot be inconsistent with themselves, right? And now let us not die, for this great fire will consume us if we shall hear the voice of Yahuah our Elohim any more, and we shall die. For what flesh is there which has heard the voice of the living El, speaking out of the midst of the fire, as we, and shall live? Do you draw near and hear all that Yahuah our Elohim shall say, and you shall speak to us all things whatsoever Yahuah our Elohim shall speak to you, and we will hear and do. And Yahuah heard the voice of your words as you spoke to me. And Yahuah said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, even all things that they have said to you. They have said well, all that they have spoken. Oh, that there was such a heart in them that they should fear me and keep my commands always, that it may be well with them and with their sons forever. Go, say to them, return you to your houses. But stand you here with me, and I will tell you all the commands and the ordinances and the judgments which you shall teach them, and let them do so in the land which I give them for an inheritance. And you shall take heed to do as Yahuah your Elohim commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left, according to all the way which Yahuah your Elohim commanded you to walk in it, that he may give you rest and that it may be well with you, and you may prolong your days on the land which you shall inherit. All right. And like I said, the version that was in the Dead Sea Scrolls very much follows along the lines of the Exodus 20, but it has that part in it where he's talking to Moshe directly, and he mentions that there will be one coming like unto him. So, but just one moment, please. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for today, and we will continue, Father willing, with Deuteronomy 6 here next week. And hopefully everything that we've read will be edifying and worth your time. If you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to share, and Yahuah will be with you. You have a great Sabbath, a great week ahead, and we'll talk to you later. Shalom.